Stupid is coming out of his mouth. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name. Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing? The season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football. This guy is a bonehead. They love him. I question your judgment as an adult. I really do. I was a total hater. I know that for a fact. And I just don't get it. Get us back our sleeves and say, bring me that. That's the one I want. You know what I love about college football? I mean, aside from everything, it's the way that it makes people make absolutely ridiculous arguments to try to defend their stance, beef up their team's resume, what have you. And we got a couple of doozies right here. CURT Cignetti, Indiana's coach, he's a brash dude. He's a proud dude. He's fighting and stumping for his team, who is coming under a lot of fire because of their schedule. A schedule whose out of conference includes Charlotte, Florida International, and Western Illinois, 2 G5s and a FCS team, all of which were 3-6 as of a couple weeks ago. All three of them, 3-6. So not just lower level teams, but really bad ones at that. And, you know, Cignetti rightly said, schedules are made years in advance. And that's something we've talked about forever. It's obnoxious. I can't stand it. I wish that this was something that they would address, but you know, as of right now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. At any rate, Indiana played a crap out of conference schedule this year. And he was talking on a podcast when he said that they're set years in advance. Yes, he followed that up with Alabama played Mercer, right? Georgia played Chattanooga, right? The schedule is what it is. Now, it's true. Alabama played Mercer. And Georgia played Tennessee Tech. But Alabama also beat Georgia, LSU, and Missouri, and South Carolina. They lost to Tennessee. They lost to Vandy. Georgia played Texas, Clemson, Tennessee, won them. Played Alabama, played Ole Miss, played Clemson in the out of conference. They'll play Georgia Tech in the out of conference. Not a banger. I mean, it's a team that just pulled off a big upset of Miami. It's a team that pulled off an upset of Florida State at the time. Remember, that was an upset when Florida State was a top 10 team. My point is, trying to compare Indiana's schedule to those two because they happen to play a one-off cream puff game, it's absolutely insane. But that's what college football does. It makes us make insane arguments. Cignetti went on to kind of beef up their resume. The schedule is what it is. We've beaten 7 Power 4 teams. Every one of those teams had a winning record when we played them, except 2 who were at 500. I don't really care what their record was when you played them. They turned out to be crap teams, every single one of them. You've got, look at this here. These are the best teams they've got on their resume. Washington at 6-5 and Michigan's 5-5. They will probably win this weekend against Northwestern, lose at Ohio State, and be a 6-6 team. That's your best wins right there. And he goes on to talk about those wins. We beat the defending national champions in Michigan. Yes, they are, again, a 500 team right now who will probably finish 500, might finish below 500 if Northwestern gets them, and the runner-up in Washington. It's true. We just looked at it. They're currently a winning team. They'll probably finish 6-5. We've beaten all of our opponents decisively except for Michigan. That's true. And that's also the only opponent who represents somewhat of the style of player you're going to play against in the playoffs, right? It's the only team you played that's got some NFL dudes. In that second half, which he admits they did not play well in, you got worn down. You looked bad. You got 19 total yards on offense. It's not looking good for you as to how that translates to bigger competition. Cignetti goes on. We didn't even trail until 2 weeks ago. We were down 10-0 at Michigan State in the first quarter and then rattled off 47 straight. And he sure did. And it was really impressive. But this argument is absolutely absurd. And then he went on to talk about ESPN. You got one network who is in bed with a conference. What are you going to get? ESPN does not control the college football committee. They air the television show. They air the television show on Tuesdays And in that television show, you got some guys on there giving some opinions, and we'll get to that in a second because we got a doozy there as well. But I don't understand what he's trying to draw here. They're rated in the top 5. I think they should be 3rd. My current rankings, I have Indiana as the number 3 team. I think they belong there at this point in the season. The college football rankings have them in the top 5. I don't know how you could complain about that with the current schedule you got. Some people will say if they had a blue blood logo on their helmet, they'd be way higher. Maybe if they were better last year, they would be too. We know that people factor in how you were last year when you're returning, when they're judging a team. We know that their schedule compares to Texas. Texas, only good game they played, they lost. A good opponent they played, they lost poorly too. But honestly, Texas just beat Arkansas. When you look at a team like Arkansas, that's a team who is a team that has a lot of the body types that Michigan has, that Indiana struggled with. But it's a poor team. I don't think Indiana would fare well against them. Honestly, I don't. Texas beat them 20-10. It's a team with a bad record. I just think that we're going to find out on Saturday what this team can do when they play against Ohio State, a team like Michigan with a lot of NFL bodies that can also score the football. And I don't think it's going to be good for Indiana. But about that show, that selection show, Ohio State legend Joey Galloway, one of my favorite players when I was young, made quite the bonehead statement. Really strange. He doubled down on that statement again later on this week when he said that Indiana should consider benching quarterback Kurtis Rourke against Ohio State. He said, what do they care more about, Ohio State or the playoff? And in his opinion, he would have never thought like this before. Never would have thought like this because as a player, the thought of sitting out a game when you had the opportunity to strap it up with your buddies drove him nuts. And he would see these guys sit out in bowl games and it drove him insane. But after watching Jordan Travis, Florida State's quarterback last year, get hurt at the end of the season, and then Florida State getting left out of the playoffs, he's evolved in his opinion. So he's proposing if Indiana cares more about the playoffs than they do beating Ohio State, they should consider sitting out their quarterback. And it's interesting because no doubt we're going to have situations where it might make more sense to do that in the future. But I think he's really mistaken here when it comes to Indiana. If Indiana loses this game bad, they might be on the outside looking in at 11-1. I did an episode about it last week where we compared all the resumes of Indiana versus the 2-loss SEC teams. And I think that it's going to work out good for them unless they get blown out. Because if they get blown out and the only team that it looks like the rest of these SEC teams in Ohio State, now you're talking about what can they possibly do in the playoffs? The only team they played with that had any juice smashed them. The other team that was a bad team that had NFL players in Michigan ground them out in the second half. They might be on the outside looking in. So benching Kurtis Rourke against Ohio State and just taking an L, that's about the worst advice I could think of. If they lose bad, they might be out. But it got me thinking about this particular tactic that we know we're going to see somebody take at some point, right? Somebody who's in the playoffs and either doesn't want to get to probably the most likely thing is we're going to see someone at some point not want to take that trip to the conference championship game. They're not going to want to take the risk of playing 17 games. They're not going to want to take the risk of potentially being left out or dropping down in the ranks, whatever it is. They're going to think it's a better strategy to maybe rest some guys, and maybe they'll do it overtly and blatantly so everybody knows, like benching a quarterback would be totally blatantly, or they'll do it in different ways and maybe try to make it not look quite so blatant and obvious. But if Indiana were to bench Kurtis Rourke and disrespect the competitive spirit of the game, because I think that's what it is, if I was on the committee, remember, the criteria for the committee is best team, and you can decide what that is however you want. The difference between the NFL and college football is people get to rule on this. And in the NFL, when we see in week 16 and 17, teams that are locked in their playoff spot, can't move up, one or down, sit guys, everybody hates it, but you can't do anything about it. In college football, you can. And they can set a precedent on that committee the first time somebody does this, whether it's dropping them down in the rankings further than you would have, or if it's a team kind of on the bubble, dropping them all the way out. Remember the criteria. Best team. To me, the best team is the team that wants to win every game, the team that wants to compete. So if I'm on there, I'm sending a message the first time that happens. We're not going to have this in college football, not in the regular season. You're going to play your game, and if you want to take that gamble and put it in my lap to judge you, I'm going to make you pay and make sure that college football fans don't have to deal with what we got to deal with in the NFL. That's where I stand on it. So take your swing at sitting your guys. The first time it happens, I hope the committee slams those dudes. Whoever does it, absolutely make an example out of them and let them know in the future, if you try this, you're putting things at risk big time. It's not going to work out like you think it might. So anyway, that's what I got. Joey Galloway, love him on the field. That was a bonehead take. Curt Cignetti trying to compare your resume to Georgia or Alabama is absolutely insane. And Indiana probably going to get steamrolled at Ohio State this week. That's what I think. That's what I think. Now, Buckeyes dealing with a huge injury, obviously. And if you want to talk about that game, you can check me out over at Juck on Bucks. But that's my story. Talk to you guys later. Juck on College Football out. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who is Juck?
Juck on Bucks.
Juck on Bucks. Juck on Bucks?
Juck.
Juck
on Bucks.
My guy, Juck.
Juck on Bucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
It's Juck on Bucks.
Okay.
Juck is junk.
The Juck eyes. The Juck eyes.
Juck on Bucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk. Juck.